again. It's me. So please let me introduce one of my best friends. His name is Jakub Winkler. And Jakub has a huge experience in Magento development. He's a very well-known person in the Magento community. He's really very good one. So Jakub, he's going to tell you more about microservices magic. Generate 10,000 images per second, which is quite important if you are the owner of the e-commerce. So let me introduce Jakub, please enjoy the talk.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jakub.
All right, thank you very much. I got a question. Should we wait a couple more minutes, or do you want me to get started? All right, so let's get started. I'm Jakub Winkler. This topic will be about microservice magic, but there won't be any magic tricks, so I do apologize for that. I'll talk about my personal experience, about the problem we kind of encountered when working with Magento and how we overcome it by using a microservice. Before I get started, I do have to apologize. I have a huge throat pain due to all the air conditioning in the cabs, subway, restaurants, pub, planes, and everything that you basically have here in the United States. And I tend to speak very fast, so if you see me going like too fast, just show me the time sign and we should be fine. So before I start, I invite you to visit our booth. It may look different here in New York because that's the picture from last week from Meet Magento Poland. And we have a treat for you. And this is not the stressful heart. It's not a soap. It's something that can help you actually. This little heart with Magento open source logo is a little stress ball, so go ahead and just grab one. And we have candies from Poland, so if you haven't never tried them, I encourage you to. So a few words about myself. I'm an active Magento community member for over 12 years now. I'm a developer myself. I don't just run the agency. I'm an architect, a consultant. I love to code. I love to do it. I always try to find solutions to optimize Magento for our partners, for the merchants. And I've established qoliber in April this year, but we actually been on the market for over 12 years. I will not tell you the previous name because it was way too long and nobody remembered that. So hopefully with the qoliber brand, that will change. A couple more words about myself. People say I got ADHD. So if you see me interrupting you while we talk, it's not I'm being rude. It just, I probably already know what you're going to say. So I do apologize in advance. And this actually is an interesting fact. I'm very passionate because of this genetic update into my genetic code. So I'm also the author of Mastering Adobe Commerce Frontend, which actually tells how to do Adobe Commerce right. We know that Huva is the first choice when it comes to Magento frontend now, but we still have a couple of 100,000 stores on Magento that could use a lot of updates, fixes, to have the stores running better and faster. And this book might actually help the developers to do this. Some people also call me Roy Kent of Magento community. So if you're a fan of Ted Lasso, you probably know Roy. And if you don't know who Roy Kent is, I encourage you to watch Ted Lasso because it's because of my very outspoken and sometimes very brutal comments about state of Magento. But I don't do it anymore, but I was actually known for long as a Roy Kent of Magento community. So what's this talk going to be about? It's about basically how to stabilize Magento or improve overall e-commerce experience using a microservice. It is based on an actual project that we developed, that we managed, and we solved the solutions for our merchant. The microservice became a buzzword. It's like AI. Right? It's like PWA a couple of years ago. Everybody was talking about PWA. Now we have AI, but microservice became a buzzword. And a lot of times when I do consulting work for larger clients, the agencies, the developers, freelancers, they always say, you need a microservice for that. We can't fix that in Magento. You better need a microservice. Sometimes it's the only choice. But because it has become a buzzword, I've actually consulted on a project where we had 34 microservices connected to Magento. Trust me, debugging that was an absolute pain, a nightmare for everybody to work with. And I'm not going to talk about microservices from the tech side. I will focus more on the practical example. But if you want to learn more about the microservice architecture, what it is, how it's managed, what about it, then that's the link you can definitely follow. Yeah, I do apologize, we started a little bit early. So, the microservices in practice, I'm not going to read all the points from the slide. Basically, from a non-technical person, a microservice is just an application running in the background that is still active. So if you were to compare it to Magento, imagine working with Excel, that every time you need to make a change in a column or in a cell, you have to restart, save the file, and relaunch the application. That's basically how Magento works. Every time you do a single action as a merchant, as a developer, or as a customer browsing the website, the platform is initialized over and over again. So it's becoming very heavy for the resources, and if it's not optimized, it can actually be a huge overkill and destroy your servers. So microservice is like a running application that just serves you the data all the time. It's still active, and it's super fast, it's easy to scale, it's platform agnostic, but actually being platform agnostic is absolutely not a challenge when we have Dockerization and virtualization available. So basically, all the e-commerce platform follow this like monolith approach. So it's like I mentioned, one huge application with hundreds of modules, or maybe even more than that, and there's nothing we can actually do about it. And it's very hard sometimes to manage that monolith, right? There are attempts to take some parts of that monolith and split it into multiple microservices independently managed by the developers or by the project. So it's always a challenge what to do. We don't know whether we should, if you got a monolith platform, it's always hard to decide what to do, right? Whether we should create a new microservice or optimize a microservice, or whether whether to optimize the platform. Hard to decide what to do. And sometimes it's a struggle, teams get together, they discuss ideas, and usually based on my experience, everybody wants to microservice everything. And that's not the right approach. Well, it's at least not in my opinion, because I believe using a microservice might be beneficial for the project, but it needs to be really thought through if it should be done. So, getting back to the project that we actually inherited. So, based on the number of products, I wouldn't say that's a large catalog, only something above 200,000. But we got 28 store views, 28 websites. The customer was showing 100 products on a page, and we had 10,000 daily visits. Again, that is not a large project. I would say that's a medium size. For some e-commerce business, we actually could say it's even small. And what was the biggest problem that we were facing with this project? So, the business owner nephew created his own ERP that was replacing product images, sometimes even a couple times a day. But it was not just uploading the image. If it changed, it was always changing the image name. So every time they did an upload, all the product image names would change. And that was the source of our problem, because store was crashing all the time, all the day. And when they hit a huge sale, even getting 10 servers to manage the application, which was super expensive for the merchant, didn't solve the problem. So we had to dig what was the actual source of the problem and find a solution. So if you work with Magento and you are I'm sorry for this. If you work with Magento and you're a developer, or maybe if you browse the website, check the image, what's going on there, you'll see that when an image on the front end, when the customer is browsing the website, the URL of this image contains this weird number. It's actually called a checksum, because Magento creates cached images. So when you access the website, even if the image, let's say, is a very large file, Magento will resize it, and this hash number you see contains some information about the image size, about the ratio, maybe about the watermark. It depends on the configuration of your Magento store. So I got a question for you. Let's say I'm browsing the catalog. I'm sorry, guys, we got started a little bit early. I can redo it if we finish in 5 minutes. So, question for you. Guess how many images are created when you try to open an image that is available on the front end? How many images actually Magento creates, and why is that actually a huge problem and a challenge for that platform?
You said 100 products per page?
No, this is for a single request.
For the catalog. I was asking about the catalog.
Yeah, the catalog had 100 products per page, but I'm asking how many images Magento generates when you just try to open an image, let's say from a product page. So how many there are?
95.
More. So that's the list. And this is not a list from the project we inherited. This is for default Magento without any customization. So if you install Magento, you configure only one store view. Magento will start creating this many images. So it is a challenge for the CPU, it is a challenge for PHP, and it actually will be a challenge for the server itself, for the hard drives, to store them once you got 10,000 visits a day and have to browse over 150,000 images. So there's supposed to be an animation. So that's actually the final number. 32 images are for a single image, even though you only see maybe 2 of them when you browse the website. So this is an absolute overkill. And this is the number of images that were generated on that project. I think it's around 180, 100, or maybe even more. So the more store views you have, the more unique configurations they have, the more themes you are using on your front end of Magento, it's adding and multiplying the number a lot. So let's look at the number exactly. The colors over here is very bad, so I only have to look at the slide. So excuse me about that. So in 10-minute window, we had 50 category pages visited by the merchants, by the customers. Each had 100 products visible. So if you will just do some basic calculations, 500 PLPs, 100 products, it means that we have 50,000 image generation requests. And if we multiply it by all the variations that we had in that project, we were generating 5 million images, sometimes in like 2-3 minute window, sometimes even less than that. And to make things even worse, Magento has a built-in thing, which is called CLI, which is a command line tool. So you can create or launch a process on the server that will regenerate all those images. But it didn't make any sense since the images from the ERPs were changing all the time. And when we tried to generate all the images just for once, it took us over 3 days. So it was not killing the entire platform. It's such an easy thing like an image generation. So that was bizarre. So that was the situation. Everybody was angry. The admins were angry because they were saying, well, that's the application's fault. Application's performance is very bad. We can do nothing about it. The merchant was angry because nobody wanted to do anything about it. But the worst part is the customers were angry because it was quite a popular brand and they couldn't shop. They couldn't buy the stuff they wanted. So that was me. And I said I will solve this because the merchant trusts us to solve the problem. So I decided, well, let's just see what we can do. So the first solution we did, we actually took deep dive into Magento code and rewrote how these images are being generated. And from those 160 images, or from the default 32 images, we narrow it down to 1. But it was still generating hundreds of thousands of images, so it didn't solve the problem at all. Under the heavy load, and our merchant was actually very active on social media, so there's a lot of campaigns going on, so the traffic on the website was all the time. So that was still a huge problem we needed to solve. So that brings us to solution number 4. So you might probably wonder, what's the solution number 2 and 3? I'm too embarrassed to tell, so let's skip those. So I do apologize for the slide. I didn't have absolutely no imagination when I created this one. So we decided to create a microservice. So everybody was talking about the microservice. Okay, I said, well, that's the only solution we have because we actually used all the options we had with Magento. We created modules, plugins, preferences, rewrites, everything that Magento offered. We tried and it failed. So that was the only option we could use. And this slide actually shows how it was thought it should work. So when you open an image file in your browser, I don't want to get too technical. The request is being sent to the HTTP server, which basically serves you HTML code to your browser. And behind this Nginx, which is the HTTP server, is a microservice. So we kind of told the server that if you hit an image with this URL, with this media catalog product cache URL, please use a microservice to generate the image, skip the Magento framework at all. So we actually had to think how to do it, because we had this weird cache in the URL, right? All those just weird checksum files, and we needed to know what to do. We needed to support the watermarks, but most of all, because of those numbers of tens of thousands requests on product and category pages, we decided we cannot use the database. Because if we start sending those requests to the database to check the image configuration, watermarks, and so on, we will kill the database, not PHP, which is the application or service that changes the PHP code into Magento framework. So after creating the microservice, it was built on React PHP, which is one of the technologies used PHP that runs as an application, right? So it doesn't have to be refreshed, it doesn't have to be reloaded, it just runs and serves and generates the images. And after doing some tweaks, after doing some operations to it, we were able to narrow image generation to 0.74 milliseconds per image generation. Now, I haven't mentioned one thing because I don't like to say bad things about other companies, but the problem with the previous solution, why our Magento was crashing, and probably if there are hosting companies on the audience, they will laugh. The customer was offered HDD drives for their Magento instance, right? So very old hardware. That's basically Magento should not be run at all. So that was actually one of the reasons behind everything crashing. But from the merchant point of view, it was like, hey, Jakub, but why an image generation is killing my framework? So that was our result. So we decided it's time to scale this. Well, obviously, we changed the solution to NVMe drives, SSDs. And this number actually got a little bit lower to 32 milliseconds, or even lower once we decided to use a RAM drive for the test drive. But that was like just something I wanted to play around. So we scaled this and launched 10 microservices at the same time. And that was the huge benefit. That is the huge benefit of the microservices, because it's a small application and you can just scale it, multiply it as many times as you want. So, and I do apologize because that is the exact number we reached. So we reached 9,083 images per second. And based on my research, if we went with like a Go language, or even better with the Rust, or go deep down and base it on a C language, we would actually be able to have the bigger number around 12,000, 30,000 images per second. So doing this, by implementing this microservice for such an easy job as an image generation, we reduce all the load on the server, we reduce all the unnecessary traffic, and weird thing happened. Magento became stable. It started selling. Everyone was happy. Nobody was angry anymore, well, except the previous hosting company, because we changed them. And the most important fact is that we built the trust with the merchant. And after doing this, we were able to convince them to change this ERP, not to overwrite and change the product images over and over again. So I do apologize for people joining us a little bit later. I can share some of this information if you reach out to me next to the qoliber stand. So funny thing happened. The conversion rate also increased on the store. Well, obviously the store wasn't crashing, so it was selling. but all the traffic was down to like, all the CPU load on the server, on the drives, was reduced to like 1-2% of its initial load. So, and the final benefit of doing this as a microservice, we were able to cut down the hosting by 80%. And the merchant started just using this money for additional advertisement, getting more business. And what did we learn from this? Basically, if you use a microservice and you plan it right, and you use all the possible options that you have with Magento or any other platforms, things can go, as our qoliber motto is, we make e-commerce go vroom, vroom. So things will go fast with a microservice. But we're also able to identify, for all the partners we work with, for all the merchants we work with, we're able to identify other elements we can actually microservice. I'll give you one case, because we still have a lot of time. For one of the merchants, for a B2B project, a high complex project with a lot of traffic, and as you know, Magento, when you have customer pricing for a B2B, right? So each customer has a unique price for every product. For a huge catalog, like 100,000 products, you need to think outside the box if you want to do it on Magento. Right, there are other options to use. Adobe has a great solution, the B2B module. It handles this very well. But at that time, that was actually 2 years ago, it was based on the open source, a custom B2B solution built for the merchant that we also took over from the market. So the merchant had over 200 million unique prices in his database, and we needed to push it to Magento. So we decided, well, we'll not be using Magento indexers because they are already slow, so we'll just be destroying them more and more again. And we decided to build a simple microservice and override how Magento fetches price. So we skipped the database, we disabled pricer indexers because they were no longer needed. But actually by disabling, I mean we just push zeros to the price indexers of the database, so the products were still visible, because that's the data that is required on a database level for Magento to display a product. And we were able to also reduce the load and do great things with this microservice. And it was very simple application. It was just communicating with MongoDB, which is very fast for non-related data. So, but I also have to tell you, microservices are not the answer to everything. Do you know what's the answer to everything? And life and the universe? Yeah, it's 42. If you don't know what's this from, it's from Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy. I would say it's quite an old movie now, but I encourage everybody to watch it. So, but from my experience, by doing a lot of consulting for larger entities, microservices are not the answer to everything. Because if you start this approach to microservice everything, you will become with a bloated software, hard to debug, and very hard to maintain. And you will actually have to end up hiring more and more developers to manage all those microservices. So doing and going with all the microservices for everything in your business, in your Magento store, is not such a great idea. But it can be beneficial. So I'll just finish these slides with 2 simple sentences. The first one is not just about microservices. It's about doing things in e-commerce, in Magento development, shopware development, and anything you do basically with the IT stuff. Doing things right, can things go vroom vroom, but I do apologize for the lack of font. I should have sent it to the organizers. But if you do it wrong, just because it's trendy, just because everybody goes microservices, we need to microservice everything, this and that, things will go clunk, clunk. And it will start getting really, really bad, really, really fast. And getting back to the things there where you were before you started implementing microservices might actually be impossible. And that's actually one project I've worked with. I cannot tell you the name because I've signed the NDA. But we had, like I said, over 30 microservices connected to the application. And doing even a simple change would require a huge process, deployment protocols, and it was basically a non-engineer monstrosity. And I decided I will not be any more part of this. So, leaving you with the slides, thank you for being here with me. And if you have any questions, we have some time. So thank you very much for attending my speech. Yes?
WebP image format.
Yeah.
How invested are you into that?
Well, this microservice that I mentioned was actually developed before WebP became popular or even mandatory. So I would say that's an old case, but we still use it. We actually did an image optimization using Cloudflare. So the WebP wasn't necessary. We might probably go there at some point, but we don't have any like red flags from Google Lighthouse or Core Web Vitals that we actually need to use WebP. So the images are optimized using first the optimization in the microservice, then the Cloudflares add additional caching. Any more questions? Well, so thank you very much. I invite you to join us at our booth. We get candies, a lot of stuff, and don't be afraid to grab the stress balls. They really help with development. Thank you very much.